Hello everyone and welcome back to a little bit of one of these other discussion sort of videos. With the Glastrier and Spectrier dynamax raids going on presently for all the good rewards which they do give, things like bottle caps and ability capsules and such are being given for defeating them, we're going for another attempt of this whole guide for defeating them as quickly and simply as possible series that we started actually back with Urshifu, which actually did quite well. And let's give a little bit of a lead off of what exactly is the best option for both of these. And the simple answer is actually Zacian. As weird as it sounds, you actually don't want to go default super effective damage for Spectrier. There's a couple of reasons why, and I'll be putting up some screenshots of actual damage calculations here. But overall, the best option for both is actually Zacian. The damage Zacian deals normally, even to Spectrier without the super effective damage bonus, is almost unreachable by even super effective hits. As you can see with this comparison of Bisharp, one of the actual best options, even if the Bisharp is holding a choice band, which this one is, doesn't deal nearly enough damage to be relatively even with it. Though there is a bit of a caveat to this, which we'll be going in a little bit later, and that is, there is possibility for Bisharp to overtake Zacian's damage. However, that is a very, very specific scenario, and overall, Zacian is simply the most consistent counter. For Glastrier, the answer is Zacian. Quite simply, it is super effective. Behemoth Bash, Behemoth Blade, as well as Behemoth Bash, we'll get to that a little bit later. Behemoth Blade deals double damage to Dynamax Pokemon intrinsically, so functionally, it is identical to super effective damage, on top of the also super effective damage that Ice is received by Steel-type moves, effectively makes a 4 times super effective hit in simplest terms, meaning that's functionally a base 400 power move, factor in same attack bonus, factor in the automatic +1 Zacian gets. Nothing is going to get close to that sheer amount of damage. Zamazenta is able to somewhat get close, and if you don't have Zacian, which most of us somewhat should because either you're playing Sword and you got Zacian normally, or you likely were around for the Shiny Zacian giveaway, which was several months ago, which gave a, Shiny Zacian to people playing Shield. Even if you have Zamazenta, it still works very well. It's not as absurd in terms of the damage numbers as Zacian is, but it's still very much up there, around maybe even half the power of Zacian is still quite absurd damage. But as for going back to specifically Spectre, because this is sort of the divisive one, there is potential for Bisharp to actually overtake Zacian's damage, but this requires a very specific setup. This requires activation of Defiant and activation of Lash Out's special bonus effect of dealing double damage when its stats are debuffed in the same turn. Naturally, Defiant gives you +2 to your attack stat, effectively doubling your attack power, and then Lash Out's bonus effect, if your stats are dropped in the same turn, doubles the attacking power of it, effectively quadrupling the power it deals. This takes Zacian's damage, which, for the numbers here, this is a regular Spectrier that we're looking at for the damage calculations here, deals around 180% of a Spectrier's HP with Behemoth Blade when Dynamaxed. Now, yes, the Dynamax Pokemon have significantly more HP than this, but we're using this number as just a baseline for comparative purposes. The Bisharp deals a little over 77% of HP with a non-boosted Choice Band Lash Out. Quadruple this damage, it definitely is quite good. You know, you're doing around 300% of this HP, so KOing it around 3 times over, which is a little under double the power of Zacian. However, if you look at Zacian relative to the baseline Bisharp, it's 2.5 times more powerful. The other thing is that Bisharp requires a very specific setup. It requires Max Phantasm, Max Darkness, Max Strike, or any of those other debuffing moves to be used against it that debuffs everyone for everyone to get that same attack boost. If you're not having everyone get that same debuff buff effect of Defiant proccing and Lash Out proccing at the same time, you're not going to be dealing anywhere near as much damage as Zacian is consistently. The other thing to remember is stat purge that, of course, these Pokemon give off. clears away all of your attack boosts, clears away your ability, so you will not get an additional Defiant boost if it uses those max moves. And that's why Bisharp is not as good as Zacian reliably. Consistency, Zacian is king. But in pure peak damage, Bisharp takes the crown. However, this is not as easy to pull up and is a lot more RNG dependent. The other thing to remember is there are shields at play. So even if you are dealing these absurd amounts of damage, the shields will still stop your damage output and reduce how much you can actually deal, thus negating the overall sheer power increase, thus making Zacian better in a practical sense. Third reason is move times. You gotta remember, if you're doing this with lobbies with other people, there will be connection times, and every turn adds on more and more connection times, more and more player determining things, and overall, more moves being used. While Behemoth Blade, and if you're using Behemoth Bash for Zamazenta, they do have quite long animation times relative to the other moves. This, however, feels longer despite overall being shorter because you are using less turns. There's also Bisharp has naturally quite low speed. Spectrier could quite possibly outspeed it, and then as such, take longer because of move animations. And again, the crux of the power for Bisharp relies on moving after, meaning you need Spectrier to attack once or multiple times before Bisharp can even go, thus dragging the fight out. Whereas Zacian outspeeds it, gets in first, you don't need to do the max animation moves over and over, thus making Zacian the faster, more consistent answer. And for Glastrier, nothing is even close to the same just ridiculous power of Zacian. Potentially outside of Spec's solar-powered Charizard, using a max move, that's the only thing that could realistically get. Well, then again, Dynamax does not work with Spec, so it'd be Life Orb. Nothing else will get close to that sheer ridiculous power aside from fire-boosted Sun moves with Life Orb from solar-powered Charizard. That's realistically it. And that kind of setup also detracts from overall damage by having only had that one thing set up Sun, and when that could just be two Zacian. Which way overall, yeah, just pretty much get Zacian for this. There are other options you could potentially do. Well, you know, Sucker Punch Yveltal. Issue with this is, again, Sucker Punch doesn't deal as much damage as what Zacian can do, and it has lower move power. Again, the same sheer power is quite good, though it doesn't deal nearly as much. Again, the Stat Purge reduces the damage output significantly. And while you might outspeed it with priority, Zacian is still the simpler answer because it's still also good for Glastrier. You can retool it. Actually, you don't even need to retool it. You can plug it in for both of them, and you're good to go. But, yeah, that's really all there is. There's not as much to go over with, well, these as there was for something like Urshifu, where there were two of them, and despite the fact that the counters were also identical there were a few other things to go into. But with this, yeah, really, it's just bludgeon them to death with Zacian. But if you do have a issue with using Zacian, as in, you know, a principle, not using it on principle, which I can completely understand, Bisharp and Yveltal are good options, as is Obstagoon, though they will take significantly longer due to their much reduced power, and overall the reliance Bisharp has on active Defiant. Similar is applicable for the Obstagoon. But with all that done, thank you guys. I wish you much luck on hunting down these horses, and see you guys next time.